The following is a project of our nonprofit newsroom. Support Midcoast Morning and local community-centered journalism today by signing up to be a monthly sustaining donor at chly.ca/donate. It doesn't take much money to support local news.
Hello and welcome to Midcoast Morning. I'm Joe Pugh. Nanaimo is offering tours of its public works yard this weekend. The city is looking to borrow $48.5 million to begin replacing and upgrading parts of the facility, which was built in the 1960s. Members of the media were invited for a separate tour yesterday. I went along, and today on the show, I'll be taking you with me to learn more about the site. We'll also talk about the alternative approval process that's opening up this week as the city seeks voter approval to borrow the money it's going to take to complete the project. We'll begin at the Public Works Yard on Labue Road, where we were addressed by Bill Sims, General Manager of Engineering and Public Works with the City of Nanaimo.
One of the things that's happened in the last 20-odd years is, of course, is rapid growth. So we're at, getting over 100,000 people now, and the facilities that we have are no different than they were, 40 years ago. The number of staff actually at Public Works is no different than it was 40 years ago. But the services that come out of here, everything from water and sewer and garbage, as I say, cemetery burials and maintenance of facilities, our parks and rec facilities, all come out of here, and that's the services that community relies upon. All rely upon the vehicles that we're fixing. We've got this fairly large project consisting of not only a fleet center, but also the administration building and a number of other things, consolidating parks, rec, and culture into this unit as well. It's a large, expensive project. There's a number of large, expensive projects on the horizon for the city. Staff started to think about, trying to do this all in one fell swoop in a compressed timeline while keeping the operation active was going to be very challenging. To make it a little bit more palatable, we decided to try and break it out into phases. So the first phase was the highest priority, and that's the fleet maintenance facility. So we have 400 pieces of equipment, 200 of which are vehicles that are on the road all the time. Everything from fire trucks to garbage trucks, to pickup trucks, again, lawnmowers, leaf blowers, and all that sort of stuff. So specialty vehicles and like large vans, the facilities crew that uses those. So given that the fleet maintenance facility is the highest priority, that's what we've been working on for the last number of years. Maybe I won't get too detailed. We've got some, The bottom line is when we start looking at the overall, we've got sort of facilities that are past their useful life. We have infrastructure that's within the yard, like storm drainage infrastructure in particular, that's also past its useful life, is not supporting a clean environment downstream. We've had quite an increase in the number of staff in women coming to work here. This was traditionally a male-oriented environment, so we've got a very small component just of for washrooms for women. So that's been challenging, and then it just sort of the expanding expectations of the community is what we're trying to keep up with. We'll go over and have a look at the shop.
We headed into the maintenance facility where the city services its vehicles. We were told that there's only one service bay large enough to fit every type of vehicle that Nanaimo has.
Welcome everyone, I'm Brandon Miller, Manager of Fleet Operations here at the city. So just to give you a little bit of a background, we have in fleet, the city owns over 200 vehicles. So about 160 regular fleet, we call them the white fleet, and about 45 of fire services fleet, which is the red fleet. So just over 200 vehicles. We also, servicing those vehicles, obviously, we have 10 mechanics here at the city. So hope to have 12 by end of the year. So between that, and we have 8 bays currently in this building, and we also operate a small equipment shop as well. So we've got one small equipment mechanic over there. So with these vehicles, obviously we do all the service repairs on the vehicles. We've got some major challenges with this facility currently, as I'm sure Bill's talked about the seismic issues we have with the concrete block. But we also have problems, as you can see, with some of our larger vehicles. Our refuse trucks, our fire trucks actually don't fit in the bays. Bill also touched on it briefly too. We are a designated inspection facility, so we're a licensed facility with Commercial Vehicle Safety and Enforcement, so CVSE. What that allows us to do is do annual commercial vehicle inspections on all of the vehicles that are over 5,000 kilos. They require an annual inspection. So as a licensed facility, we have to have a weather-tight building. We need a permanent roof. These are requirements from CVSE. We need concrete floors, smooth concrete floors. So we have certain things that have to, are a requirement with our license that we have to uphold. Certain tooling, certain lifts, hoists, that sort of thing. A comfortable environment for mechanics to work in. So that's very important. You can kind of see we've got a hoist here between two bays, which isn't ideal, but we're trying to make the best of the space that we currently have. So we've added a hoist in there just so we can have another vehicle in, but clearly, in the middle of a door isn't ideal, but we're just working with what we have currently.
The fleet maintenance facility is the most substantial portion of the city's planned upgrades to the public works yard in Phase 1 and is where most of the proposed loan money is budgeted for.
You can see here all of our refuse trucks, and we have 12 of these in our fleet, all have automated arms. So when we service the arms, they need to be out. Becomes a challenge. So not only the length of our bays, but we also have constraints with our width as well, because there are certain things like our reels, our toolboxes, benches that have to go in between our bays. So lots of space issues around that as well. And although they make up a very small portion of our fleet, the refuse trucks, they take up a lot of service. Yeah, they are in the shop every morning. Yeah, because they're such a high frequent vehicle, lots of starts and stops. So they require a lot of service, a lot of moving parts with the automated arm, the hoppers and whatnot. So they take a huge bulk of our time.
Midcoast Morning will be right back.
Midcoast Morning is made possible by the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and listeners like you. Support Midcoast Morning and CHLY's nonprofit newsroom today by becoming a sustaining donor at chly.ca/donate. Local news can't survive without your support. Another way to help us out is to share this show with your friends and tell them why they should support us. Finally, if you're listening to the podcast edition of Midcoast Morning, go and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast feed you use. It helps people find us.
Today on the show, we're exploring Phase 1 of Nanaimo's plan to update its public works yard. The city is looking to borrow $48.5 million to complete the work. It's divided into 4 categories. $40 million are budgeted towards foundational work. This includes the fleet maintenance facility, the truck wash, and utilities and servicing. $4.5 million is budgeted towards stormwater management facilities. $1.25 million are going towards fire training tower fuel conversion. And $2.75 million is budgeted towards a trail through Bevan Park that the city says is being added instead of a sidewalk in front of the Public Works Yard on Labview Road. These figures include around $15 million budgeted towards contingencies and inflation. The city says if the loan is approved, it will cost the average household $77 a year, whereas if the project were funded from taxes instead of borrowing, it would cost the average household $933 in 2024. Bill Sims says that the projected cost of the buildings came as a surprise to city staff.
The cost is a sticker shock, and guess what? I think city staff were shocked as well. We keep asking ourselves over the last 4 years that we've been working towards this through various experts on it. Is that really the price? Are you sure that's really the price? We didn't sort of believe it ourselves. But it's true. It's the price. It's typical of things across the country.
If phase one is like the most critical aspect of this project, like how important are phases 2 and 3?
Well, I think you can look around and imagine that this is where the crews musters from. This is where management, supervisors, admin staff, technical staff operate from, and recognize that we're bursting at the seams here. So phase 2, which is really the administrative building, and the future phases is really around stores and making sure that we have secure storage. Can we stretch those out? I would suggest that not with the admin building, because this building that the staff work out of now is beyond its useful life as well. I think that's a critical one, but some of the other ones, maybe we can stretch them out. We've looked at options. We've said, well, why don't we move somewhere else? Why don't we buy another piece of property? Why don't we renovate the old overweighties on Terminal Park? Why don't we? So we looked at all of those and couldn't find any economical, reasonable solutions that would fit our needs, the community, quite frankly, the needs of the community. And so we're focused on the initial needs. The next set of needs is going to be the admin building for sure. And of course, we're going to continue to revisit this. We've been looking at this at least for 4 years now and revisiting it, with different experts, and we're narrowing in on this particular project. At this point, we've got a concept design. So we're early in the phase. We don't want to invest a whole bunch of money until we know that the borrowing bylaw has been adopted by council. When we have the funding in place, then we get into the detailed design. We'll go through a year and a half of detailed design, and then we'll get into the construction. So then we tender the construction. So at this point, we've got enough information to get us a budget, which is why there's also a fairly large contingency in there, because as you get into detailed design, you learn more and refine. It'll be just a continual process of refinement, just like it has been for the last 4 years. But certainly the sticker shock, I heard the comment, the price is ridiculous, I don't like the price, and guess what, staff doesn't like the price either. I have a close acquaintance that's trying to build a very modest home. The build cost from the builder is $750,000 for a very modest home. It's like the prices of things have gone stupid. And I think Laura's going to tell you that the most effective way of paying for any capital project, regardless of the price, I'm not minimizing the price, but regardless of what the total investment is over a long term. Just like my acquaintance would like to pay for his $750,000 house over the life of his mortgage, as opposed to trying to come up with $750,000 by winning the lottery.
To fund the project, the city is looking to borrow $48.5 million. To do so, they need to consult the electorate. They're using what's called an alternative approval process. During the alternative approval process, eligible Nanaimo voters who are opposed to the loan can submit an elector response form. If at least 10% of eligible voters in Nanaimo submit the form, then council must either abandon the idea of the loan or put it to a referendum. Those in favor of the loan are not required to take any action during the alternative approval process. Laura Mercer, the city's finance director, spoke with those on the tour.
The city cannot borrow without electoral approval. So council chose the alternative approval process, or an AAP, to help satisfy that requirement. So if the AAP is successful, that will give the city the authority to borrow up to $48.5 million. If, however, the project comes in less than $48.5 million, the city would only borrow up to the amount that is needed to build the project. We wouldn't borrow the full amount if we didn't need it. The borrowing is proposed to happen over 4 years, with it being amortized over 20. So our most recent estimates, with full borrowing over 20 years at 4.78%, and of course that'll change by the time we would go to borrow, but at that 4.78%, the annual debt servicing costs or the repayment would be about $4 million per year. And that's for both interest and principal repayment. So to put that in a little bit more perspective, the cost would, based on these assumptions, the cost would be about $77 for a typical house in Nanaimo in 2024 dollars. So if the AAP was unsuccessful, the project would likely still need to go ahead, but we would have to find an alternative funding source for the project. And in all likelihood, taxation would be that vehicle that we would use to fund the project. And council has a few different options to levy to raise the money, but and we would look at those if that was the case.
Following the tour, there was a group of protesters opposed to the alternative approval process across the street from the Public Works yard.
My name is Sandy Bartlett. I'm out here in support of the association that they put together to make people aware of the AAP process. One of the problems with the process itself is that nobody really knows about it. The city, when they advertise for these types of things that they're doing now with the Nanaimo Operations Center, they do so in the Nanaimo Bulletin, and then they put it on their website. That's proven to be very ineffective. The citizens of Nanaimo aren't aware of it. I'm a lawyer by trade. I've been practicing in Nanaimo for 36 years, and I only found out this year through this AAP process about the AAP process. So if I don't know about it, I'm in the industry, and I don't know about it, I can guarantee you that there's going to be a lot of people in the city that don't know anything about it. Since we've been doing what we've been doing, a lot more people have become aware, and there's a lot more interest in what's going on, and there's a lot more opposition.
So this AAP is about borrowing $48.5 million to create the first phase of this public works yard, a new fleet maintenance facility. What are your thoughts on the issue that this AAP is about?
Well, I understand they want to borrow the funds in order to do this project. The phase one is phase one of a 4-phase project. They don't know exactly what the costs are going to be. They haven't been able to articulate that to me. And I've been in a couple of council meetings. For them to borrow money on a project they're not quite sure of the extent of the cost is, I think, is irresponsible. I think that the city has an obligation to determine fairly accurately what the costs are going to be before they start borrowing money to build buildings. If they do borrow the funds and they get into the process of building the building and there's an increase, a cost associated with it, that most of these projects go over budget, and we're already in a situation where we borrowed funds, the interest that's going to be accumulating on those funds is going to add to the cost and the burden of the citizens through their taxes on their properties. If there's significant overruns and Phase 2, Phase 3, and Phase 4 wind up costing a lot more than they had anticipated, we don't even know where that's going to end or how much that's going to cost the citizens of Nanaimo.
So in that $48 million figure, a substantial portion of that, more than $10 million of that, is contingencies for in case this costs more than we expected to. There's a bit of a chicken and egg thing, I would imagine, in that the city can't build a new building unless they have an idea that they have the funds to do it. How do you see that?
Well, in fact, there are a lot more projects built into this thing than just the public works building that the city's been showing you today. There's a new park, trails that they want to include into this project. They also want to include an upgrade to the fire training station. After they've built a brand new station downtown to the tune of $18 million. So these things that they've got into this project, where they want to borrow funds for, aren't needs as they've described. The city has described the AAP process as suitable for needs-based type funds to build things that you need, not want. But park trails, improvements to the fire training facility, those are wants, they're not needs. If it was just a simple building and everybody knew the exact cost, I think you'd have less concern about it. But it's not what it's about. There's about a lot of other things that they want to include in the process as well.
And if more than 10% of the population voice their opposition to this AAP, what would you expect to happen next?
It's going to be up to the city. The city has options. They can have a referendum, which is what we think they should be doing now, or they can skip the referendum process and just simply pay for it out of general revenue funds that they raise every year on their budget. I think those are their options. Or the option that I think they should do is go back to the drawing table and perhaps use other methods to try and refurbish the buildings. They can seismically upgrade the buildings at a much reduced cost. There's other options that the city has available to them that they're not even talking about.
After the tour, I also got in touch with Nanaimo City Councillor Cheryl Armstrong. What do you think it's important the public knows this time around with the AAP process?
Unfortunately, there was a clerical error last time, so that's now been addressed. So I think what's come out of this is that the public started to become more aware of local politics. So I think that's a good thing, actually. And I know there's a large group mobilizing to oppose the APP because they don't believe it's democratic. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes.
So there are two parts of this. There is the AAP process itself, and then there's the issue that this AAP is trying to address of a $48.5 million loan for phase one of rebuilding the public works yard. On that front, what do you think people need to know about what that money's being borrowed for, what it's being used for, and what would happen if we aren't allowed to borrow it?
Well, I think one thing that they have to look at is our staff has been very patient throughout the years. This should have been replaced years ago, but many councils, and it was their prerogative at the time, did not want to raise taxes to rebuild, which would have been a lot cheaper. No matter when we do it, we're going to have public opposition, but it has to get done. You were on the tour. You saw how old the buildings are. They're in disrepair. You know, those were built back in, I believe, in the 1960s. Our population was closer to 20-some thousand. Now we're almost at 100,000. So it just does not meet the city's needs anymore. We have to rebuild. I think one of the concerns I've heard from people is they think it's a Taj Mahal. And I don't believe that's the case. I think that we need to look at it again, which we are doing on Thursday, to see is there ways that we can cut back? How many bays? Like, do we need as many bays as they say? I'm not an expert in this field, so I rely on the experts that helped us do the plans. So and this is what they've come up with. I think we could look at, do we need to have that trail in there? I'm not sure. Is there a way that we could do that cheaper, which would cut, maybe $1 million down off? I mean, it's still not a lot of money, but it's some.
And so what happens if we aren't allowed to borrow this money?
So the next stage will be then, depending, again, now this is just, the options that we have. It'll be a council decision. We can go to a public referendum, which would be, everybody in the city, it goes to referendum. You have to come out and vote. So then it's, yays versus nays. Or we can decide to raise taxes, not even go to public referendum to raise it, or nothing. Those are the three options that I see happening.
And what do you imagine? What is the need on this project?
Well, for me, it's a priority. Like, we can't keep putting it off, because eventually we're going to have to bite the bullet. And I do understand people are hurting, but every council will tell you the same thing. People were hurting, right? I personally would like to have done it 3 years ago when interest rates were lower, but at the time, it wasn't one of the major projects that came forward. We had to deal with water issues. A few years ago, we had to build the water treatment plant, right? These are necessities to have a town run, but they're not something that everybody likes. Like, it's not a new swimming pool. It's not a new arena. This is something that looks after the growth of the city infrastructure, and to me, it's always been one of my priorities to get that built.
And is there a message you'd like to give people who are against the AAP process specifically?
I understand that, why they're against it. Like, I don't know if you know my voting record. I voted for some APPs and voted against. I do understand it's almost like negative billing, right? Like, and I get that. But one of the reasons I believe that the APP process was brought in by government was for projects like this that may not get voter approval, which are absolutely have to be built. So I understand their frustration. It's something I grapple with, to be quite honest. Like, part of me thinks, yes, we should go to referendum, and then if it fails, then we go just to tax, or maybe do what I would like to see, and I've been saying this for a while, is I would like to see to raise our asset management, means more tax tax implications up front, but we'd have more money to put towards these types of projects.
Is there anything else you think it's important people know about this issue?
I just think it's really important that people get out, and if you're against it, then you need to oppose it. But it's really important to do it not based on the fact that you don't like the APP. It should be based on the fact that you don't want the building. I understand a lot of people are just voting against it because they don't like the process. But to me, that's doing a disservice to the city workers. And so far we've been really lucky that there's been no major complaints made by the union or WorkSafe, but those could be coming, and then we're going to be paying big fines. But I just really want them to make an educated vote against the APP, and it should be against building it. It shouldn't be against the APP process.
Nanaimo City Councillor Cheryl Armstrong. On Thursday at 7 p.m., there will be a council workshop and info session at the Vancouver Island Conference Centre where people can see presentations and ask questions about the Operations Centre project. Those interested in a guided tour of Nanaimo's public works yard can register for a free tour this Saturday or one on January 31st. To register, go to recreation.nanaimo.ca or call 250-756-5200. The alternative approval process opens Thursday, January 18th and runs until February 20th at 4:30 p.m. That's our story for the day. Thank you for joining me. I'm Joe Pugh, host and producer of Midcoast Morning. Jesse Woodward is our executive producer, and Arby Frew is our technical advisor. You can sign up for CHLY's newsletter at chly.ca/subscribe for updates from our nonprofit newsroom and more. Our theme song is First One by local Nanaimo band Waste Management. If you have a story you would like us to cover, email us at news@chly.ca. That's all for now. I'll talk to you on another Midcoast Morning.
Midcoast Morning would not be possible without the funding of the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and listeners like you. Midcoast Morning is a project of CHLY's nonprofit newsroom. Support nonprofit journalism in Nanaimo and on the Salish Sea today by becoming a monthly sustaining donor at $5 or more per month. Support the program at chly.ca/donate. If you're already a supporter, record a voice memo telling others where you're listening from and why they too should support our work. After you're done, you can email it to us. Also, share the podcast with your friends. While Meta is blocking Canadian users from sharing news content on their Facebook feeds, you can still share our podcast directly with your friends via Facebook or Instagram Messenger. Finally, this program acknowledges and gives thanks to the Nanaimo First Nation as we broadcast and podcast from their traditional territory. Thanks for listening.